Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you today about many things related to emotions. We hear the word emotions and we have all sorts of ideas about what they are, what they aren't. We also hear about emotional intelligence quite a lot these days. And I have a feeling that the way it's discussed is often not the way it really is. So to just kick things off, could you clarify for me, for everyone, what is emotional intelligence? What does it pertain to? And then maybe we can use that as a way to drill into the deeper question of what are emotions.
Sure. I think, at the simplest level, it's how we reason with and about our emotions and feelings. That's like the simple definition. The way I talk about it is as a set of skills. And we use the acronym RULER to describe those skills. The first is in faces, body, and voice.
When I think about most uses of the words emotional intelligence, it seems to correlate, again, in a very non-scientific way, seems to correlate with one's ability to tolerate others' emotions and make sense of the emotions of others. For instance,
I really like to think of them as emotion skills. And that within the R, the U, the L, the E, and the R that I described, there are sub-skills. And so part of what you're talking about is the body awareness. Some people are more cognitive, they're just very language oriented. Some people, a lot of therapists, talking about somatosensory things, all good, which is different than when you're overwhelmed, right? Which is my emotion of the year, which is I'm just saturated, I can't even figure out what's going on anymore, which is also different from fear. And we call that emotion differentiation or granularity. People call it, they're slightly different. The differentiation is like between emotions and the granularity might be within the emotion. But from my work, just to go on about this for a moment, the best example I have is I do a lot of corporate training. And so I'm in a room filled.
Few minutes, longer than I want this audience to have to wait.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we should
I got enough.
But you have a growth mindset, so you're okay.
There you go. Yeah.
But so disappointment, unmet expectations. Everything was legit. It just didn't work out. Anger, perceived injustice. And that's a really important.
And it tastes great. Now, I've been drinking AG1 since 2012. Be doing far more harm than we realize.
I think it's fun. And maybe it's just, if you want to just use it for fun, not a problem. If we're going to use it to really communicate, not so great.
I'm thinking of instances where people are just using these with the intention of expressing their dislike of something.
If it's, a more famous person in politics, obviously people are very clear how they feel.
Politicians sort of open themselves up to it.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Public-facing people in general, I've heard, open themselves up to it. But politicians in particular, I think we sort of give the general public a pass to say almost anything about them. But and thank you for parsing those two. Very useful to me. As soon as you describe contentment that way, I imagine waking up and rather than thinking about what needs to be done and the things I want to achieve, which I want to achieve, they bring me joy.
Yeah.
I'm throwing a third word there just to confuse myself. This notion of contentment, the way that you described, I could see.
Have a beer and watch the game. I would never do that anyway. But anyway, that's just not my thing. That would make me, my brain would be burnt. My dream would be to leave here, go take a hot yoga class and take a walk, have a glass of wine, maybe by myself or with a friend, and then end the day.
All those things are readily available within less than a mile of here. We can point you in the right direction. It sounds lovely. The introversion, extroversion bit is going to prick up people's ears. It certainly did mine. I like time alone. I also like time alone in the presence of many people. In fact, I get my best work done always either alone in nature or in Manhattan.
Then plan a party. Just go plan a party. And the group of extroverts, there's bonfires, there's beer, there's loud music on the beach, and the introverts are like, we have to make sure we have good napkins. We want to, we're going to have 4 people, it's going to be quiet music. That's just, how we're built.
Interesting. When I think of throwing a great party, and I've thrown a few what I like to think were great parties, it involves inviting a bunch of people over and then being able to stand back from a lot of it and not have to participate in all of it. I just like seeing friends that didn't know each other start to interact.
That's cool. An opportunity to regulate your emotions, right? But then if you get like triggered, you've never had experience, so it's actually harder for you. Someone like me, I'm practicing it all the time, right? I'm always like, I'm in a bad mood, I got to give a meeting. I'm like irritable, I got to give a presentation. So I'm like constantly like figuring out how to deal with my emotions. And that's why they're separate concepts. And in addition to it, just to build on this, knowing your personality traits can be extraordinarily helpful for choosing the best strategies to regulate your emotions. Why is that? I was traveling in Australia recently. Marc's office and tell him that I love him. I'm like, this is really weird. Like, we need to, like, I picked up the phone. I'm like, what is happening right now? What is happening right now? And, people have preconceived notions. Maybe she thought I was overwhelmed and devastated and needed space. But at the same time, like, make a phone call, leave me a voice message, and give me, some options. I had one friend, she's like, Marc, I know you're going through a lot right now. I just want you to know, earlier, it's called pleasantness, not goodness or badness. It's, in this moment, am I feeling highly pleasant or am I feeling unpleasant? Do I feel like approaching my day, my colleagues? Do I feel like avoiding my colleagues? Do I feel safe and comfortable? Do I feel uncomfortable? That's the x-axis. And the way I like to think about it is that from the moment we wake up in the morning till the time we go to bed, that is activated. We're just energy. And of course, my little 5-year-old, he's in the blue. I feel terrible. And then my fixer, like, I want to fix this kid. I don't want this kid to be in the blue. And so I know I can't do that because it's part of it's like the rules of ruler. You don't fix people's feelings. You don't fix people's feelings. So I just said to the boy, I'm just curious, you need a strategy. And he goes, no. And I'm like, no. I said, I'm just curious, why don't you need a strategy? He goes, because I know it's impermanent.
Wow. Maybe the next generations coming up are far more emotionally intelligent than ours, if I may.
Included a lot of bullying. And I had 2 parents who loved me. But, my mother was a very anxious woman who never had strategies. So, she was always saying, I'm having a nervous breakdown. And she'd lock herself in her room and she wouldn't come out for a few hours. My father was, as we might call today, the tough guy who was kind of toxically masculine. Son, you got to toughen up. He even said to me once, he's gone now and we had a good relationship. But I'll never forget, he said, son, I used to beat kids up like you.
He said that?
He did. And he thought that was the message that I needed to hear to toughen up, right? He was doing that through love. It was not emotionally intelligent, who I can be or who I am. The second is empathic and kind of coupled with compassionate, which is kind of the different form of like relationship building. It was really rough for me, actually. She came for a wedding. One of my colleagues got married on March 3rd of 2020. Well, my mother-in-law is from Panama. And so just so you know, all flights to Panama got canceled by March 13th, and they didn't open until September. So we had this 81-year-old, lovely, lovely woman. But it's a lot for your mother-in-law to live with you for 8 months. One little quick side story for this. I think it's relevant. So it was getting really, I'm working from home. My mother-in-law was there. She wants me to make her a cappuccino every morning, which I like to do for the first week. But after the 4th month, learn how to use the machine. And I don't want to do it myself. I'm afraid of the machine. I'm like,
sorry, I'm not. I didn't mean to laugh out loud.
That's all right.
Those cappuccino machines can be scary.
They can be, but growth mindset, right? Watch me, I'll help you do it. No, I want you to make the coffee. I'm like, you got to make your own coffee. I told you, I don't like people in the morning. You got to make your own coffee. Anyhow, one night we're at dinner, and she looks at me, and she speaks Spanish. I speak Spanish. And so she said, in Spanish, are you really the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence? And I looked at her, I'm like, not tonight. Not tonight. We're going down. And it was a mess.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to laugh.
No, it's all right.
I laughed before you said it was a mess. I just, your impression of...
Resistance to wanting to learn about emotional intelligence. What they want to do in general is get an A in my course. but they don't, and they want to memorize like, oh, so the theory was written in 1990 by Mayer and Salovey.
This is a pre-med course.
No, this is
Okay.
just general.
That was a joke against
Undergrad, yeah.
pre-meds. Love the pre-meds, but they're
I have
very
stories
grade conscious.
I have stories about that too, but and so I say, no, this is about you developing the skills. Like this is going to be, you're going to think really critically about, and part of the essays you're going to write are going to be your action plans for building your own emotional intelligence. I don't want to do that. I want to, get the test and take,
That so much of the stress that I have to imagine good people, and these students are, after all, I imagine
they're
they're good people,
amazing.
they're not evil.
Very few.
Not characterologically evil, let's hope, are experiencing envy, the wish to have more of what's. Talking about that, one of the things that surfaced was this notion that some people have a natural empathic attunement, or the emotion that the other person is feeling is a negative one, and it's about us or about them. And as a consequence, we're not able to really be present to help the person the way that you helped your dad. Like he was frustrated with his wife.
Yes.
Had he been frustrated with you, it might be a little bit more challenging to say, hey, well, Dad, maybe what you're experiencing in terms of your frustration with me is actually blank.
Yeah,
right? Because
for sure.
You're now in a tether with them. So to what extent is empathic attunement a positive trait? Are there people who are better at, it's not just that. So what do we know about the brain science of empathy?
I don't know much about that, to be honest. What I know more about is the kind of psychological experience of empathy, and that there are multiple forms of it. So, for example, there's the cognitive empathy piece where I've never had your experience, but intellectually I get that you've suffered, or intellectually I get your experience. There's the emotional empathy, which is, when I meet other survivors of abuse.
As opposed to telling people what they need to do. Your friend, or this person who was an effective source of support in that moment, said, can you get in the hot air balloon and look down on your life? I noticed that they didn't say, get in the hot air balloon for a second and then do this. As a former partner of mine said, who I'm still on great terms with, no one likes to be shifted.
Yeah, no one's to be told what to do.
Right. No one wants to be shifted. No one, no matter what state they're in, high or low, wants somebody to come along and try and shift them.
Or just tell them, go for a walk. Okay, well, why am I, a blue-collar worker and a very, very talented air conditioning repairman, and had a good career. But all of a sudden, went to graduate school and got PhDs. And that was, it was a little bit difficult for my father at some time. And so when I got a job at
phenotypes, stereotypes is a bit loaded, a lot loaded. But emotionality and the notion of people being overly emotional has unfortunately a bit of a negative
it does.
Hinge to it. Whereas somebody being passionate, that sounds like a pretty good thing.
Well, emotional is historically you're hysterical. It means that you are not in control of your emotions. I don't like to use that term ever. I just find it a useless term. And because that's oftentimes when people think about, I'm going to get on my phone. It's just where our brains are wanting to do things. When we're in environments where there's a lot of curiosity, where there is high engagement, attention is much better. So that's the simplest thing to think about. In my work, my whole career has been about building curriculum to help educators integrate emotions into their everyday classroom. And part of what we help them understand, going back to that mood meter and her foundation, Born This Way Foundation, many years ago, and we did a study of thousands of high school students across America. And we looked at how do they feel when they're in school. And what we found was 77% of the feelings, and I repeat that, 77%.
Energy versus pleasantness axis.
Yeah.
After one does this for a few days or weeks, maybe checking in and touching the app, a couple times a day, maybe again in the evening upon waking. What sort of data or information does one get back that can be informative toward being a healthier, happier person. A healthier person.
More contented.
More content.
Well, what's really cool about the app, and the reason why we have an app, is that technology can be super helpful in this instance for building self-awareness. So if I set reminders, which you can do on the app, to check in the morning, maybe after lunch or right before I go home, you pick whatever works for you, or you can do it randomly. And then you aggregate your data across time. Right now you have...
Can we call it that? Emotional awareness to kids and to adults to better the world. I don't think I'm overreaching there. I think that's the goal. I'd like to get back to your origin story a bit to understand a little bit more about the motivation behind the goal. You've written about in your book, and you've spoken a little bit today.
My teacher. And I can still remember locking eyes with my teacher and him just looking away. And that feeling that you have of complete despair, like how is it that I'm not being protected, by this adult in my community? And so that's the issue that we're trying to solve for. Now, I could make all kinds of excuses about the teacher. Maybe he didn't really notice. I don't buy it because it was repeated over time and it was happening a lot. I could also say that, maybe he misread my facial expression. I'm not buying that either. I think it was either he had a mindset, this is a rite of passage. You got to toughen up, kiddo, or you're not going to survive in your Clifton High School. Or another point is that he just was like, I have no idea what to do about it, and I'm just going to let it go. None of those are an option for me anymore. It's just not acceptable.
Out and be scary. So I think they must have sensed some safety with us. And I actually have very fond memories of those kids and know some of them still now. So yeah, I asked that way in part because I realized I missed a lot. Well, Lord knows I missed a lot of what was going on in high school for other reasons, but I just missed a lot of this. And I think even in academic culture as an adult, not now, but I certainly witnessed bullying at meetings that was more demonstrative, where people would make fun of people in general in a way that I felt suppressed the likelihood that people would ask questions,
It was not cool. And I felt like, firstly, what was really interesting to me as a psychologist is that in that moment, I regressed to 10 years old. It was psychologically... all the memories of all the feelings and the bodily reactions, I was like, boom. And then, luckily, I do have a 5th degree black belt. Luckily, I have a PhD in psychology. Luckily, I've had 10 years of therapy, and I've been teaching emotional intelligence for 25 years. I'm like, Mark, you're 50. You've got a black belt. Like, it took me a lot to recover. And I had to make a choice because, I'm still intimidated by that. And it makes me sad to even admit it, because I don't like that I'm at this place in my life where I still can be intimidated by the bullies, but it's how right? Think about it. I mean, what anger meant to me when I was 5 is not what it meant to me when I was 10 or 15 or 25 or now 55.
Your description of confronting this bully, I don't even want to call them your colleague because there's nothing collegial about
I agree.
that.
I thought it was an embarrassment for the university.
But more importantly, the fact that you were able to confront them is, to me, and I think to anybody that hears that story, the definition of courage.
Yeah.
Because it's in the moments where we feel like this big and we're collapsed on ourselves and we don't know where the resources are and we don't have somebody sitting there like holding our shoulder saying, listen, I'm going to go talk to them, or let's go talk to them, that you
until 48 writing this book that I decided, people ask me why are you so passionate? And I would say I hated school, I was bullied, but I believe I was robbed of my emotional life as a child because of the abuse and, my circumstances. And I felt I needed to just share that a little bit. Not the focus, but I needed to be real. So I'm sharing about Uncle Marvin, the 6th grade teacher from Monticello, New York State. And this guy has this, like that woman in the audience, he had an epiphany. He's like, are you talking about Marvin Moore, the 6th grade social studies teacher from Monticello, New York? I'm like, yes. He's like, Mark, you're not going to believe this, but your Uncle Marvin was my Uncle Marvin. I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, your uncle was my 6th grade teacher 45 years ago, and he's the reason why I teach. I was blown away. I was shaking, so excited that I never met one of my uncle's actual students.
a newsletter and provide your email. And I should point out that we do not share your email with anybody. Thank you once again for joining me for today's discussion all about emotions with Dr. Marc Brackett. And last